What's the creepiest or most unexplained thing you've seen in broad daylight? Story 1. There's a strange intersection near my house that about 3 months ago started getting torn up because it was deemed too dangerous and replaced with a roundabout. The weird part is that it was a perfectly normal four-way intersection. 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out, with dedicated left turn lanes. And yet, almost every single week, someone crashed there. Every month, there was either a near-fatal accident or worse. Police couldn't figure out why, so they petitioned to change it. They adjusted the light timing and lowered the speed limit. Total crashes went down. But here's the messed up part. Serious injuries tripled. It got so bad they stationed cops there full-time to monitor it. What they noticed was bizarre. If they watched the intersection non-stop, nothing happened. The moment they looked away, someone would blast through a red light or turn left on red. They tried one last fix, removing 2 of the lights and replacing them with stop signs on one road. Day 1, multi-car pileup. Day 2, a minivan rollover. Day 3, the mayor's daughter hit someone going 50 miles per hour. Day 4, the intersection was shut down for construction. Story 2. In 2008, I was racing in a mountain bike competition in the Midwest. It was brutally hot, around 100 degrees, and the woods felt suffocating, like there was barely any oxygen. 3 of us were far ahead of the rest of the racers, and were about to lap another guy when he suddenly veered off the trail and went straight down a steep ravine. All 3 of us stopped immediately. The drop was deep and nearly vertical. We found his bike halfway down, but the rider was gone. Search teams were sent out. Nothing was ever found. To this day, he's never been located. Story 3. When I was a little girl, I was playing in my bedroom with my sister. I looked out the window and saw a man standing there, staring at us. I told my sister to leave the room and ran to get my dad. He didn't believe me and thought I was imagining things. That night, I barely slept. Growing up, I would often hear footsteps outside at night, or what sounded like my parents' car doors opening long after they'd gone to bed. Years later, I looked up our house on Google Maps. I had always believed we lived completely isolated in the woods. Turns out there was a small house, clearly occupied, just a few hundred yards away through the trees. After that, my family took my crazy stories a lot more seriously. Story 4. When I was a teenager, I was at a friend's house while his parents and siblings were gone. I stepped out onto the back porch to tie my shoes. Maybe 20 seconds tops. I went back inside, and suddenly his entire family was home, sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner, staring at me like I was insane, and asking why I just walked into their house. I asked what time it was. They said 6:30 p.m. I had lost an entire hour doing a 2-second task. I still have no idea where that time went. Story 5. He had never seen an opossum before, and didn't even know such an animal existed. To him, small animals were squirrels, rats, mice, chipmunks. That was it. One day he was backing his car out of the apartment's underground garage when he heard this horrifying screeching noise. He got out and went to check the rear passenger tire, and there was an opossum, mouth wide open, hissing at him. He completely lost it and called 911, trying to explain that he was trapped in a parking garage with some kind of monster. Story 6. When I was 15, my family went on a cross-country trip and spent a night camping in the Grand Canyon. One evening around 6 p.m., still daylight, we attended a ranger talk and then walked back to camp. We took a shortcut off the trail and noticed a light ahead. As we got closer, we saw a man sitting at a desk in the middle of the woods, illuminated by a lantern. It was a full-sized office desk, completely out of place. He had long sideburns and looked dressed like someone from the 1800s. My dad slowly backed us toward the trail, and we left. The man never looked up or acknowledged us. There were 5 of us, 2 adults and 3 teens, and we all remember it clearly. I don't believe in ghosts, but I still can't explain what we saw. Story 7. My wife and I were living just outside San Antonio, Texas. We had this massive L-shaped couch that could easily seat 7 people. One morning we woke up and the couch was sitting in the exact center of the living room, perfectly straight, about 3 feet away from the walls on both sides. I asked my wife, but she said she never left the bedroom. Our dog sleeps with us, and the bedroom door was closed. There's no way either of them could have moved it. And I don't sleepwalk. No earthquakes, nothing. This was about a year ago. Story 8. In college, I lived on the 11th floor of an apartment with no balcony. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, I watched a man walk into my apartment about 10 seconds before I did. I walked in, automatically bolted the door behind me, and assumed one of my 3 roommates had company. I set my stuff down and went toward the back bedroom to say hi. My roommates had no idea what I was talking about. We searched the apartment, it wasn't big, and found no one. The door was still bolted from the inside. My roommates stayed in the back room, completely freaked out. Story 9. When I was 4 and my brother was 10, he stayed home from school to babysit me while our mom went to work. We left emergency numbers on the fridge and headed out. At some point, our dog started barking violently, which was extremely out of character. We were in the kitchen waiting for biscuits to finish baking when the barking got louder, meaning she was in the front yard near the side of the house. My brother pulled the kitchen curtain aside, and a man was standing there staring straight at us, like he expected the curtain to open. The doorknob immediately started rattling. My brother grabbed me and ran to the phone. As soon as he dialed, the rattling stopped. My mom came home and police arrived shortly after, but the man was never found. My brother remembers it just as clearly as I do. Story 10. This one can be explained, but the image still creeps me out. It was during the planking craze before I knew what it was. I took a taxi into town, everything felt normal, and then I turned into the town square. There were about 200 people planking on everything. Benches, ledges, railings. I genuinely thought something terrible had happened, like a bomb or active shooter situation. For a few seconds, I felt pure dread. Then someone explained it and we laughed. But I'll never forget that brief moment of absolute unease. Story 11. A man with freshly exposed bone on his arm and missing a substantial amount of skin and muscle walked up to me in a parking lot asking me calmly for cigarettes. It really freaked me out and told him I was calling 911. One for him. He immediately ran off and I gave his description to 912. 1. There wasn't much blood, but the guy clearly needed immediate medical attention. This was in San Jose on an afternoon about 5 to 6 years ago. I still have that image giving me nightmares to this day. Story 12. Me, my 2 brothers, and our uncle were running down the lake in his boat on a beautiful summer day. Blue sky as far as the eye can see. Until we looked towards the north shore line and saw a smallish passenger jet flying low, until it went below the tree line and disappeared. We were flabbergasted because our family has been in the area for over 100 years and there is not an airstrip in that direction anywhere. There was no loud bang, no fireball, nothing. No way it had crashed. We still don't know how it was possible that it did what it did. Story 13. Creepy but explainable. My dad is a paramedic, and one call took him to an SUV that had driven into the river and was being towed out. The car was obviously not working, and the 2 guys inside had already passed away. As they're pulling the dead guys out of the car, suddenly all the lights flash on, the windshield wipers start going on full speed, and the car starts blaring the radio at max volume. Freaked everyone right out. Story 14. I was standing on a street corner waiting to cross the street. There was a man there with a boy that doesn't seem to be his, but I think nothing of it. Then this other guy rolls up to the stoplight in a convertible, also with a young boy in the front seat. The guy in the car yells to the guy at the crosswalk, Hey, is that your boy? Nice. The guy at the crosswalk kind of smiles nervously and waves as the car drove off. And my friend and I exchanged worried looks, pretty certain we just saw pedos giving each other what's up in the street. Story 15. Okay, I know I'm probably too late for this post to get any traction, but here goes. My parents Airbnb'd a house in Florida for a month and invited my wife and I to stay with them for a week. We drove from KCMO to the Fort Myers, but my best friend was living in Jackson, Mississippi and offered to let us stay the night on the way there and back. We left late Friday night. Saturday morning, around 10 a.m., we crossed the border between Arkansas and Mississippi and approached Hollandale, Mississippi. The first thing we saw was a burnt-out late 90s Cadillac in a ditch right before town. As we got closer, a coyote ran from near the caddy across the road in front of us. We got into town and there wasn't a soul around. Nobody. The houses were boarded up, the gas station and grocery store were empty. The closest we saw to life was a single cop car at the police station. We turned a corner, following the GPS, and came across a small hospital or retirement home. All the doors and windows were open, bedding and mattresses were littering the front lawn, and a single gurney on its side was leaning against an overturned wheelchair. It was a ghost town, like you hear about them in the Wild West, but I'd never seen a modern one in real life. But the whole time I felt like we were being watched. Story 16. It was 1984, I was 15 years old and was alone at my older sister's house. It was late morning, I had just got out of the shower, still wrapped in a towel, when I heard a noise outside. I looked out a window and watched a complete stranger tying the doorknob of the main entrance to the railing of the deck with a rope I used to walk the dog with. He then leaned a mop that was on the deck against the door. I called my sister, told her what happened, got dressed, got the heck out of the house through a different door, and hid in the bushes until police arrived. The house was somewhat remote with no close neighbors. Found out later the door he tied up was unlocked. No clue how long he had been lurking around before I knew of his presence. To this day, we have no idea who that was and what his motives were. Beyond creepy, definitely unexplained. Story 17. Not really creepy, but I was walking down the street on my way to the store when a large dog jumped through a glass window from a second story of a house and landed on the front lawn. I tried knocking on the door and got no answer from them or any of their neighbors, so I called animal control and stayed with the photo dog, who other than a few scratches was okay. Once they arrived, they called the police to investigate because even the animal control lady had no clue what would cause a dog to do that. Story 18. My family had the car packed up for a road trip because we were moving across the country from the PNW to the Rust Belt. We were heading to the highway to get out of town and had to take some weird access road to get there. On the way, there was some man holding a long barrel rifle to a woman's head walking through a vegetable garden. He was holding it with one hand and had a cigarette in his mouth. The woman was crying. My mom didn't believe me. I was 14. I know what I saw. Story 19. My dad, brother, and I went to a movie theater one day in Florida. It was around 4-ish, so it was getting darker but still light out. We went up to the front where you buy tickets, and when we looked around, there was absolutely no one in the movie theater at all. No employees, no other guests. We simply walked in, looking all around to try to find anyone we could to purchase a movie ticket, but could find no one else. All the movies in each of the theaters we checked were running but with no one else inside. But we just sat down and watched a movie, then left without seeing anyone else the whole time. It was very surreal. Story 20. On a trip to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Stopped to gas up at some rundown gas station that was also a truck stop in Mississippi. Went to the bathroom, and as I'm standing at the urinal, I had the strangest feeling that something was off. This strange feeling overwhelmed the entire left side of my body. I don't claim to be supernatural or have any weird feelings or premonitions, and I have never experienced that feeling before that day or since. Anyways, I get up on my tippy toes to look to my left where the stalls were located. There was this deranged-looking white guy with nasty, greasy hair and a messed-up scowl on his face staring directly at me. The most typical-looking psycho killer you could imagine. He had to have been standing on the toilet because I could see his whole face and the upper part of his shoulders. Immediately zipped up and got the F out of Dodge. I didn't even wash my hands. Story 21. It's such a strange memory. Back in primary school, I remember clearly that one day, while waiting to go into the actual school building, quite an amount of students gathered around a poster taped to the library on the opposite side of our school. I went there to see what they were looking at. The whole situation was so strange, many were disgusted and frightened. I still remember that poster vaguely. It was different pictures of cut-apart cats. Like there was a picture of a cat's head next to its body, feet cut off, etc. There were like 6 or so different pictures on there. In the middle was apparently a warning. Keep your cats inside. I don't know what exactly was written there because I couldn't read too good back then, and all I remember was the picture. Our teachers noticed because a few kids cried. They had that poster taken down immediately. I seriously would like to know what sick jerk put this thing next to a primary school. I remember our parents telling us to not play in the woods. There was one, or maybe more, who knows, person actively mutilating cats. We knew this, we didn't need the pictures. I guess the police caught whoever it was, because 2 weeks or so later, nobody talked about it anymore. Story 22. My high school girlfriend and her family all talked about the ghost in their house and always said that it sounded like a man wearing boots walking down the hallway. We were all very close, and one day, when they weren't home, I just walked in and went to my girlfriend's room and laid on her bed while I waited for them to get back. A man in boots walked slowly right down the hall and right past the door to GF's room where I was laying. I did the next logical thing and just climbed out of her bedroom window. They showed up a few minutes later and asked why I was just standing around in the front yard and why I hadn't just gone in. I told them that I heard the ghost and climbed out of the window to escape. They laughed their freaking heads off. Broad daylight, totally creepy, and very unexplained. Story 23. I believe there is a name for this phenomenon, but I would never know how to go about Googling such a thing. But this was around 2013 or so, and I was having a smoke in front of my apartment on the front steps in the middle of the day, around noon or so. I got up to head back, and just for a few fleeting seconds while looking at the building, it looked totally unfamiliar. I knew I lived there, I knew it was my home, I knew I had just stepped outside only 5 minutes previously. But my brain was giving me some kind of indication that I had never seen this place before, and that there was danger inherent. I just kind of violently wagged my head back and forth, like an aggressive no gesture, and was immediately back to normal. But I'll never forget that moment. It was like my concept of reality had very momentarily just cracked. Story 24. I was walking past a church one day when I was about 15, and standing in front of one of the graves was a cowboy dressed head to toe in pure white. He looked straight out of a movie. His hat, shirt, waistcoat, trousers, and boots were all so white, like an incredibly clean white, as if he'd only just put them on. He was white, had short brown hair, stubble, and was an average-looking guy. I kept staring at him, blinked, and then he was just gone. I live in the UK, so it was weird to see anyone resembling a cowboy anyway. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I could swear he was there. He looked so real. Story 25. My father and I are window cleaners. We were doing a vacant home from the Roaring '20s era, and I mean giant chandelier with the wraparound spiral staircase checkerboard flooring with the fancy carved golden trim. I could write paragraphs on this home. It was big, bold, and beautiful. Well, my father is upstairs doing master bedroom windows, listening to music through a speaker, once again vacant home. It's something from the 70s and I am coming upstairs when the sun through a window hits the chandelier and I am momentarily blinded. Like flashbang stunned for just a second. When I recover, there is no more music and the whole house feels different. Like it almost the same, but there is some small thing that I would never notice that has changed. I asked my dad if he was listening to music, and he told me, no, but that's a great idea, and started playing some music from his phone. It is the same song I was hearing when coming up the stairs, but from the beginning. There is this small part of me that is convinced that when I am on my deathbed, I will look out the window and see the thing I know is off and realize I am in a different world than I was when going up those stairs. Also, my father doesn't remember the house. Story 26. Something that happened to me rather than saw. I was about 4 and I was waiting for my dad and uncle. They're up at our apartment, down on the street, and some dude, don't even think I looked at his face, came and told me my dad was waiting for me on another street. I just said, no, he's not, and he legit grabbed my arm and said, come on, he told me to come get you. I let out the most blood-curdling scream you ever heard and kept yelling for my dad as loud as I could, and he stopped grabbing me and ran. I shudder to think what would have happened if he didn't. Story 27. I was driving to college and sadly I saw a dot squirrel hopping oddly in the street. At first I thought, aw, cute, but as I got Dot closer, I could see his brain coming out of his head. It was all nerve reaction. I had no idea if it had fallen from a tree or was hit by a car, but I felt so bad for it as it seized in the street that I backed up and lined up my front tire to run it over and put it out of its misery, as humanely as I could. Of course, just as I rolled forward, a little old lady opened her front door to get her paper and saw me. As far as she knew, I ran over squirrels, slowly as a habit. Very surreal. This happened in 1983 and I see the scene in my head like, .it was yesterday. Story 28. In 1996, I took an Amtrak to Eugene, Oregon, and while walking around the train station looking at the old historic photos and Old West displays, I saw a man and woman, about 45 to 50 years old, leading a teenage girl around by the hand. He had a red kerchief over her eyes, a Western-style bandana, and I thought they were playing some weird game, and it had something to do with the Old West theme at the station. The girl was perhaps 15 and was blindfolded and was trusting the couple to lead her around. I asked the man, did she rob the bank or something? He smiled and I went along my way. Perhaps 15 years later, I was watching a documentary about a man who kidnapped a few young girls and kept them as slaves. He would allow them to get some fresh air now and then by leading them around blindfolded in public. I had no reason to think anything was afoot at the time, but I will always wonder if I had witnessed such a horror. Story 29. I was maybe 14 to 15 years old and I would frequently sleep on the couch in our living room. We lived in a typical suburban colonial where the couch faced the front door. Since I could remember, we never locked our doors, as we lived in a pretty decent city. I remember one night I was still awake at 3 to 4 a.m. listening to music when I saw a car quickly pull up our driveway. I then saw a very skinny, tall man open our front door, stand in the hallway for 20 to 30 seconds facing my direction, then leave the house and drive away quickly. I remember telling my parents and entire family this in the morning, and they did not believe me. My dad insisted it was him, as he'd leave for work in the early hours of the morning. I know I was young, but I also know that was not my dad, as my dad was stockier and shorter than this man. Freaks me out to this day to think what this man was going to do. Story 30. I grew up in the former Panama Canal Zone, and my elementary school was located in one of the oldest towns. It sat at the base of a huge hill that was partly used as a quarry during the construction days, and there was a ridge behind the school that once housed a cemetery that got moved, but apparently not all the bodies were accounted for. Well, there's plenty of hauntings around that area because of the cemetery, and deaths on and around the quarry. So the school is 3 stories with a courtyard in the middle. One bright sunny day when I was in 2nd grade, I got excused to use the restroom, and when I stepped outside, I glanced across the courtyard and saw a freaking horse just chilling in the hallway. It walked a few feet, then vanished. Needless to say, I was freaked out and later told everyone. Apparently others had seen the horse on different floors, and some even saw its probable owner with it. I never saw it again, but there are still stories of weird crap in that building, now government offices, to this day. Story 31. I got lost on state land behind a park near my house growing up. There was a trail. I just wandered off and lost my way being a dumb kid. I was in there for what seemed like forever and started to get nervous because I couldn't find the trail again. Right before I started to panic about being lost, I noticed a man in a flannel not far away kneeled down. I started to approach him. His back was turned, but he looked like he was rummaging around on the ground. I was about 25 yards away when he stood up suddenly. He was holding a decapitated deer head by the antlers. I freaked out and ducked behind a tree. I heard him moving around a little longer, then silence. I ran straight north after that, the direction of the park, and forgot the trail. I fought my way through the woods and found the park again. My dad said I was gone in less than an hour. I told him what I saw, and he explained the guy in the flannel probably just wanted the rack off a dead buck. No big deal, worked. Still freaked me out though. Story 32. Oh, this just happened. In the middle of the day, I'm driving home from running some errands. I'm on one of those roads that's sort of a highway, but still goes through a lot of backcountry and outlying neighborhoods. I live in a major city in the US. I'm at a stoplight when I see a person emerging from the brush on the side of the road wearing head-to-toe trash bags. I mean head-to-toe. 2 little holes cut for eyes, but otherwise no skin exposed. He had a walking stick also with trash bags tied to it. Before I could even process what I was seeing, the light turned green and I was off. The last 15 minutes of my drive were me muttering, "What the actual crap?" And for the days following, all I could hear in my head is Danny DeVito saying, "I'm the trash man." Wild. Story 33. This maybe isn't creepy, but it's definitely unexplained. To me anyway. Maybe 12 to 15 years ago, every now and then, I'd see these little light squiggles in the air. If you've played Kirby Canvas Curse, it looked kind of like that, a little rainbowy white squiggle. It was fast, too, never lasted more than a second. I always figured it was a trick of the light, so it never bothered me. I just thought, I wonder what that thing is. Oh well, it must be a trick of the light. Then one night, I came home late with my dad, probably around midnight to 1 o'clock. I was ahead of him walking towards the door. Out of the corner of my eye, I see it. One of those squiggles darted through the front lawn. The street was mostly illuminated by the street lights, so once again I thought it was just something with the light. A few seconds pass. "Hey, did you just see that light go across the lawn?" my dad asked. All that time I thought it was just in my head. I asked him if it was like a squiggle of light. He said yes. After we moved, I never saw anything like it ever again. I think about it every now and then. I wonder if my dad still remembers. If anyone has seen anything like what I described or knows what it was we saw, what was it? Story 34. When I was a teenager, out walking my dog in the English countryside, I stumbled across a lovely group of pagans, druids, I don't know the terminology, performing some sort of midsummer celebration or ritual. I assume midsummer because it was June. My dog had run down into a grove and was barking, so I followed her down, where she was very excitedly greeting everyone. They were all dressed up in colorful robes. I apologized profusely because I felt very embarrassed, like I was definitely seeing something I wasn't supposed to, and also because of my dog. They apologized profusely, presumably because I was a kid and they saw my entirely weirded out and confused expression. I wrangled the dog and we went on our way. I realized how odd it was afterwards, but it was still a very charming English encounter. At least now I know how I'd react in a horror movie. Oh, sorry, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Story 35. I was around 10 to 12 years old when I was walking home with my family. My 2 brothers ran ahead while my parents and little sister were bringing up the rear. I was in the middle when I got this urge to look up ahead. I had been fiddling with my iPod, and honestly, I don't know what I saw. It was a very tall, probably 7 to 9 feet best guess, lanky figure shrouded in all black. It walked slightly hunched and almost like it had a slight limp, but it moved fast. It crossed the street from our neighbor's house and passed in front of our car, where it just disappeared. I should have been able to see it based on its height, but it literally just vanished. I ran and searched all around and in our car, but found nothing. My right to this day, I can't explain it, but I was in my right mind and know what I saw. I just wish I had some answers.